So for those of you who may not know me, my name is Alex, and welcome to my short overview on the history, structure, and use of codeine as an analgesic. So to begin this presentation, I want to quickly discuss three terms that you've probably heard before and are often used interchangeably. So these terms are opiates, opioids, and narcotics. So an opiate is any chemical substance that is synthesized from the opium poppy plant, and these include things like morphine as well as codeine, whereas opioids are any compound that act on the opioid or opioid receptors in our brain. So essentially, any opiate is also an opioid, and these two terms can be used interchangeably. Within opioids, there are several more subclassifications, which we'll cover shortly, but for reference, codeine, which you can see here, is what's called as a phenanthrene. So what are narcotics? Narcotics comes from the Greek word for stupor, narcoticum, and historically referred to the illicit use of opioids or opiates by law enforcement. And so due to these negative connotations, the medical field is beginning to move away from this term. So what does codeine look like? Codeine is virtually the exact same molecule as morphine, except the hydroxyl group, which is normally located here, on the morphine molecule has instead been methylated, and so here in yellow you can see where the new methyl group has now been added. As I stated previously, codeine is what we call a phenanthrene, so you can see here in pink the three aromatic carbon rings which are present in both codeine and morphine and are what classify them as phenanthrenes. There are three other main opioid classifications, which you can see here on the right, along with their parent structure that we identify them with. So for example, phenylhepthylamines, such as methadone, have two aromatic carbon rings, which are connected with a long hydrocarbon chain and an amine group. If we want to be more specific, we can also classify codeine as an alkaloid phenanthrene, and this is because of the lone nitrogen atom here in green. Finally, the most important thing you'll notice about the structure are the chiral centers that I've labeled here with blue dots. And in basic terms, you can think of a chiral center as a carbon atom attached to four different groups. Now, why is this important? Well, when we synthesize molecules, it is possible to get different enantiomers. So essentially, the molecule will have the same components, but the way they're oriented will be different. And why is that important? Well, enantiomers often react differently. So if you can imagine, if we're synthesizing a drug such as codeine, we want the form of the drug molecule that will actually react with the receptors in our brain. So we want the form of codeine that is biologically active. Okay, so how does codeine work? Opioids like codeine work by activating our opioid receptors in our nerve cells, and these receptors belong to a family of proteins known as G protein coupled receptors, or GPCRs. Codeine is a partial agonist, which means that relative to a full agonist like morphine, it will only produce a partial response. So in the case of codeine, it only works as a mild to moderate pain reliever. And this is actually one of the many benefits of codeine, as it is generally regarded as one of our safer analgesics, and in many countries you can actually buy it over the counter. It's also considered as a step-down drug, so for many people that may have developed a dependence on a harder drug like morphine, we can use codeine to wean them off their dependency. I mentioned before that morphine and codeine are virtually the same molecule, and you can see that a bit more clearly here. So on the left here we have morphine, and on the right we have codeine. And you can see the only real difference between morphine and codeine is that this hydroxyl group here has now been methylated with the addition of a CH3 group. So this is actually really nice because the opium poppy plant actually doesn't contain enough content of codeine to be used medically. So we can actually synthesize codeine from morphine with the use of a methylating agent to get codeine. So that's it for my presentation, and I hope you learned something. Thanks.